Good afternoon and a warm welcome to our Conversations in Design session. I'm Claire German, Managing Director of Design Centre Chelsea Harbour. In this exciting new format, we're keeping our community engaged and inspired wherever they are. We're bringing together designers, industry insiders and media hosts for some great conversations online. And now to our speakers. By the power of technology, I'm delighted to introduce two multi-award winning experts, Karen Howes, CEO and founder of Taylor Howes, and Charu Gandhi, founder and director of Elicyon. Both are renowned for creating luxury, bespoke interiors of the highest caliber. Today, we're going to open the doors to some of their fabulous projects. This promises to be such a fascinating session, and who better to chair it than Henrietta Thompson? With so much to discuss, there may not be time for questions and answers. So without further ado, over to you, Henrietta, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so much. And welcome everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'm very happy to see you again, Karen and Charu.
It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Albeit in this environment.
I know. But it's a lovely day, and you know we're still talking about the things that matter, and in this case, SHOWFLATS, which you know is a subject that has long fascinated me for lots of reasons, you know I think we're seeing some images through now. Hold on a second. So really, I mean, one of the reasons we're talking about this, you know, as the property market is showing signs of picking up again, and we're looking to see how can interior designers and architects broaden their portfolio of services by turning an empty space into a coveted listing. What are the differences in designing for residential projects that reflect the personalities of the client to creating a stunning space that will appeal to a wider demographic? How can you actually maintain flair and imagination while working within the confines of a much shorter time frame and a much quicker turnaround? There's so many things that are different from this genre. I mean, designing a show flat is not the same as designing a flat for a client who's going to live there, client who's, you know, it's, when you're translating all of their tastes and so on into a home, it's a completely different thing. And instead, you know, you really have to capture the imaginations of a much, much broader audience. I think maybe it would be a good idea to actually start by discussing the genre as a whole, and you know, the practical requirements, the clients, the purpose, and I think we could use this as a good lead-in actually for each of you to talk about your own experience within show flat design as well. So perhaps Karen, we can start with you, and we can talk through, you know, from the beginnings, the first show flat that you ever did through to, you know, the ones that you're doing today. Maybe just talk us through some of your experiences.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, and hi everybody. And we're really talking about something that has been my passion now for over 30 years. I started in doing show apartments. We've done over 1,000 projects since then, and you know, we're very lucky in that we've worked in all of pretty much most of the major developments in London over that time. In fact, the image you're looking at here is the War Office in Whitehall, which is, we finished recently the space planning optimization of that, which is one of the most complex plannings that I've ever done in my career. And I think that as well brings us on to the difference between then and now. You know, back in the day, you know, we were brought in right at the end to basically shove some furniture into a space, disguise any of the mistakes the developer had made in the specification, and pray that the sockets were in the right place. Now, and really we were known as the kind of carpets and curtains girls in those days, very much a decorator's role rather than an interior designer, interior architecture role. Now, I'm pleased to say, after many years of campaigning and hard work, we're very much recognised in line with the architects, and we're often brought in before the architects and pre-planning on developments so that every aspect is considered. So when the show apartment finally goes in to showcase all of that vision and passion that's being put into it, there are sockets in the right places, and the curtains will fit above the windows, and all of those little things that you need to think about when you're designing a show apartment works really seamlessly. In fact, this image that we're on now is one of 6 show apartments that I've done at One Kensington in just opposite Kensington Palace. It's a development of mixture. This is in the original part of the building, and then there's a modern design at the front done by David Chipperfield, which most of you will have driven past. And our remit here was to do the marketing suite and the show apartments. And the minute one of them sold, then we'd move on to the next. It was kind of a rolling program. The great thing about doing show apartments is it is a showcase for your work. So designers listening in, why do I want to do show apartments? It is a very different discipline to private clients, but we can't always show our private client work. So it is a window on the world to what we can do. Lots of people get to see it. You win lots of clients through it who buy in the same development, who like what you do. So we've done, in this particular development, on the back of these show flats, having done 6 show flats, we've also done 7 or 8 private client projects in the same development. This image here actually is Park Crescent, which very brave developer, Amazon, about, 3 years ago now. I always forget the timing. Park Crescent, 2016, goes so quickly. He decided actually to furnish every show apartment in this development, which is quite unusual. Normally they might do 1, 2, 3, depending on how big the development is. But everyone sold straight away because purchasers don't always have the vision to imagine what a white box can be as a home. And that really, therefore, is our job as designers, is to create that wow impact on entering and really set it apart from the sometimes hundreds of apartments that people go and have a look round. So that's kind of a brief little look. This actually is quite an interesting one. So this is going back to, which I can't believe actually, 15 years ago, 2005. Charu and I were talking about it the other day, and we're just saying it actually hasn't dated. In fact, one of the investors of this development, this is the Phillimores, actually the purchaser, unusually, so most of the show apartments we do, the purchasers will buy absolutely everything, walk in with their clothes, turnkey, job done, and then we might often go in and layer it even further for them. This one actually, the purchaser was a major art collector, so came with his own collection of furniture and art. We did actually go in and do some stuff for him. So one of the investors actually kept the furniture. It's in his house in North London and still looks great. So this is again Phillimores as well, 15 years ago. I think one of our things at Taylor Howes, we're not afraid and shy of colour, and I would say, the era of beige show apartments, thank goodness, has gone. This is a CGI of the penthouse at Chelsea Creek. Again, we were involved pre-planning on this development all the way through, and again, this was done, I think this was about 10 years ago now. So it's been very nice to have a little trip down memory lane. So thank you. And this is more of the same penthouse on the river. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Some amazing spaces there, really. And it is, it's wonderful to see how they haven't dated, actually, some of those pretty much.
Yeah, it was to see them.
Absolutely. It's really incredible. So Charu, maybe you can talk us through some of your images and some of your projects.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Show us. Cue the images.
But I can.
That one's mine.
I'll take credit for it. No problem.
This one.
So, but as a bit of background, actually, I cut my teeth designing show apartments first at Candy and Candy back in 2010. So not quite as long as Karen. And at the time, they were sort of flying off the shelves. So it was, couldn't keep up with the demand, but it was very much about the Candy brand, which was an interesting experience because it was in a new build. It was very much about the developer's brand. And that was an interesting experience. It was about making each unit in One Hyde Park feel different from the other. Some were park facing, some were city facing. And it was all about the impact and selling the building with every unit. For me at the time, I had been practicing architecture in the lead up, and it was a very interesting moment in time in my career, seeing architecture coming through into interior design and the impact it could have on sales values, on the media and the press that was generated through those show apartments, and really the ability for the designer to showcase their work, and also on the thematic we created. So because we created so many show units at One Hyde Park, each one could have a different theme. And that really informed actually the way we at Elicyon design our show units, where almost always we're creating a narrative or a theme. And it's actually a real opportunity for the design team to get quite creative and have a little bit of fun, because although you don't know the end user, like Karen said, we're not what I describe as grayish, the gray beige show units, which we still do occasionally if the client, the developer really wants them. But we use them as an opportunity typically to actually do something quite fun, do something quite playful, make a statement. Because I think what has evolved from 2010 to 2020 is the sheer quantum of show units out there. And how do you make it stand out? And how do you make it look different? That the end user who is going to walk into your show apartment is probably going to be looking at 8 units that day across town. Because if, today there was a buyer saying, I want to buy an apartment in Mayfair and Knightsbridge, there are easily 6 to 8 to 10 developments they could be looking at over the course of the day. And really your brief from your developer client is to make it look different and stand out without it being so different that's not appealing. I think an interesting thing to touch upon is in terms of developer clients, and I'm sure Karen probably has this too, we have different types of developer clients. We have the institutional developers, the larger scale. So this is Chelsea Barracks, which is Qatari BR. So that's a large scale developer which has a big team. They have quite a structured approach to the development. They have quite a structured brief. But on the other hand, there's some instances where we're doing a show flat for a private client. So it may be a project we actually designed for them 5 years ago. They're now, either moving city or they're moving to larger premises, and they want us to help them bring their private home to market. So that's another type of show flat. And then we have some clients which are smaller scale developers. They have either bought a large townhouse in Knightsbridge or multiple townhouses, and they're doing lateral apartments across those. So there are different types of developer clients, and the amount that you handhold them or play a role in shaping their brief can vary. I'm going to wait for my images to come round to talk through them, because I've sort of talked over them without making reference to them. So I'll talk about them maybe in the next round.
Really, I mean, there's a lot that you both touched on that I would really like to unpick a little bit more. And I think it works if we have these images from both of you just rolling, so that we can refer to them as and when, but we can see them and be inspired by them, because these are such beautiful spaces as well. So one thing that you both mentioned is that age of the beige show apartment is hopefully potentially over. Do you think that's really the case? I mean, Charu, you said you sometimes do still get asked to keep things neutral. I've seen through my career, and even at the most luxury end of the spectrum, so many incredibly bland show flats. The beige and it's the neutral, but I can see why it happens, that need to appeal to everybody. But at the same time, how do you balance that need and the need for kind of the neutrality with the requirement to inspire and really show potential and vision?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But I think the role of a designer, you've got to really bear in mind what your job is. So your job is to appeal to the widest market possible. And I think that how you get round not doing your 50 Shades of Beige is actually understanding your market. So, London is a series of villages, and the demographics are very different from literally. If you get it wrong in a show flat, you can get it wrong by a mile. And you can literally be wrong by one street. So it's very much knowing the market, making sure that you're speaking with the agents, that you really interpret what is going to give them the best chance of selling it, and then putting that as well in the context of the architectural envelope that you're given to work with. But I think when we talk about colour, we're not talking about mass colour everywhere, so that if somebody walks in and they hate emerald green, they're not going to look at it, it's on a sofa. But I do think our job is to bring new and inspiring ideas to the table. So you want 2 or 3 really wow pieces that nobody's seen before, and then they go away, and that really, as Charu said, it sticks in their mind when they're looking at a whole host of other things.
Would you agree with that, Charu? Do you, without giving away trade secrets, do you have any particular design rules when it comes to show flats?
Well, I think it's right. It's all about the brief, and ultimately there are 4 things that play a factor. There's the developer, there's the sales team that are selling the property, listening to them. What do they know? Very often another show flat's already been done in the development. We're coming in and doing the second or the third in some instances. What are the learnings? Knowing your client. Very often, again, we've had a One Hyde Park client move to Chelsea Barracks. They were a private client at One Hyde Park. They came and saw a show unit at Chelsea Barracks. So it is knowing your tribe, learning from, there's a lot you can learn from your private clients. And then the fourth is the brand of the fourth is the brand of the development. And the fifth actually is the architecture of the space. And then I often do is I often look at the design of the show apartment a little bit like set design. Often it's about making that impact of a space and making it quite immersive. It's a bit like going to the theater. You're in there for a little bit of time and you kind of have to be fully immersed in the story and the narrative. And very often for us, it is about creating a backdrop story to the project that then gives you a creative framework and within which you can be adventurous without it being arbitrary. Because sometimes for the sake of being different, you don't want to find yourself making random design decisions just to be different. So it's you need the framework to hold you together, and that narrative often holds us together.
Love that idea. Do you have any examples of that kind of, creating a narrative?
Yeah, actually. So if we go to the Chelsea Barracks images, where we did the common parts, and then we did 3 show apartments. So there you go. So in the common parts, the image on the left is inspired by chalk and clay, because the word Chelsea comes from the word chalk being delivered on the riverfront. And there's lots of little subtle abstract references. So the rug is about chalk settling within the earth and the pattern it forms. Like the striation. The artwork above the fireplace is called Shifting Sands. It's a bespoke artwork, which is layers of silk thread representing the movement of earth. The image on the right is the residence lounge, where we were inspired by a narrative called The Botanist, and the botanist coming from Hans Sloane, Sloane Square, the idea of the apothecary with the Chelsea Physic Garden. Again, you have to be careful here, because what you don't want it to feel like literally is a stage set where you walk in and go, I know exactly the theme here. Along the way of the design journey, that narrative gets abstracted, but it becomes your framework. And then if we move forward an image, a slide, then this is one of the show apartments we did, which was very much inspired by the art and craft scene in Chelsea. So there's a lot of ceramics, there's lots of artwork sourced from local artists. Again, you wouldn't know that theme as an obvious when you walked in, but there's a sort of a woven thread through the whole project. And then in the next slide are 2 further apartments. The one on the left, we called it Steel, and it was very much inspired by the history of the barracks. So I chose this image because it shows the sort of industrial references. And in the little tiny left corner of the image of the blue, you can see a William Morris inspired fabric on the cushion, which comes from the William Morris inspired balustrades to Chelsea Barracks. And the one on the right is the third apartment, which we called Orchard. And it was inspired by the Chelsea Flower Show. So you can see the rug is sort of an unfurling flower like a peony, but again, very abstracted. There are certain floral references in the ceramics on the table. So those are the four narratives: chalk and clay, the botanist, steel, artist residence, and orchard. So they formed a kind of collection of themes across the project for us.
So lovely. And then, so I mean, what would you both say, starting with Karen, what does success look like for a show flat? I mean, our show, I know we because we've seen actually through some of your examples already that show flats are not always temporary by their nature. I mean, I don't know how often a buyer might come in and actually just say, right, I'll take it as it is. But what does success look like? What happens to the pieces afterwards? What gives a show flat longevity?
Yeah, for me, the best thing is when I get a call from the developer saying it's sold the next day. That's just
amazing. Love it.
Can we do another one? How quick? And there's the challenge. How quickly can you do another one? Because they want to complete quickly and they want to move in. And then that's the challenge, because of course, often with the first show flat, you've had a lovely, nice lead time. And like Charu said, you've gone on this journey and you've had time to be super creative and think about all those wonderful design ideas. So I think I can be pretty much positive that I don't think any of our show flats have ever not sold without the furniture. For me, then, the next layer of success is when the purchaser themselves pick up the phone and say, actually, it's great as it is, but I want to add a few more extra layers to it. But we always design show homes that are going to be lived in. So we don't cheat by not having curtains that will not pull, or furniture that is rock solid that you'd never want to sit down and put your feet up in. It really is, in that respect, it's no different to a private client. The big differences, I think, between show apartment and private client, I mean, show apartments, you're very closely involved with the client, the developer, at the beginning, and then they're very involved at the end. And then they completely leave you alone in the middle because they've signed off on everything. Nothing is going to change, and your team are getting on with it. Private client, some can be involved all the way through, and they can change their mind halfway through as they travel or they get different ideas and things. So that's kind of one of the big differences. And we've often, we will often actually have a fictitious almost client in mind when we're designing the show apartment, because that way you can make it feel personal rather than, as I say, just furniture stuffed in a space for the sake of it. So the War Office image that I showed you, that was for an art collector.
Maybe we can have a look at that again, actually.
Yeah. I think that's one of the first images. This one here was very much based for an art collector and how they would display their art in the spaces. And we're lucky we do have a lot of art collector clients. So and the show apartment at 1 Kensington. If we scroll forward to so this was the marketing suite at 1 Kensington, and then the next one with the purple dining chairs. This is the lobby. So. The lovely thing there was I had a prospective buyer, saw the show apartment, phoned me up, said, I absolutely love what you've done. I can't decide whether to buy the side apartment, the show apartment, or one of the modern ones at the front. We chatted for a while. He said, I really trust you. I like you. Will you make the decision as to which one I buy? I'd never met him. And I said, well, that is a real responsibility. Give me 24 hours. I'm going to think about this and I'm going to come back to you with my answer tomorrow. So I did a pros and cons list, phoned him the next day, and I said, well, what's your view right now? And he said, well, actually, I'm living at Chelsea Harbour. at the moment, and I've got this amazing view of the river. And I said to him, then that's the decision that I've made for you. You're going to buy one of the front apartments overlooking Kensington Palace, because I can come in and do anything to the interior for you, but what I can't do is change your view. And we had a lovely journey with them through all of that. So, you know, it is a great way, again, for designers listening in to really, you know, to pick up some great clients, actually, because they've already seen your work. You've already got that first bond in a way that they like what you do. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the level of, you know, narrative and meaning that is imbued even within a show flat, I think may come as a surprise to some people as well. You know, I think, and even when, you know, seeing some of these examples as well, and I know that there are pieces within these apartments that have been commissioned bespoke as well.
Yeah.
So, is that, how does that work? I mean, particularly say those beautiful marquetry panels that we saw, that we were discussing. You know, how does it work with commissioning bespoke items for a show flat, where you don't know necessarily if they're going to stay there, for example?
Yeah, or not. I think, you know, again, part of our duty as designers is to showcase artisans' works as well, and give them a platform and a forum to do that. So, I mean, these mother of pearl marquetry inlay panels are made in an amazing workshop in Wales, and they're really passionate about what they do. So, you know, again, it is a way as a designer that you can bring something unique to the development. Again, I think that's, again, a really key aspect and responsibility, if you like, of the designer working on it. In fact, in the end, I took an existing client to see this marketing suite, and he commissioned some panels as a result of it. So, you know, that again is a discussion to have with some of your amazing suppliers. You know, it gives them a showcase as well.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. You know, to not just see it as a showcase for the property, but, you know, and for your work, but actually all for the artisans and the artists who are involved. Is that something that you do as well, Charu?
Yes, and because I think otherwise there is a, you know, the longevity point is really good, because you kind of have to design the unit as if it's going to be there for forever, because otherwise there is a risk it just ends up feeling like an ephemeral showroom of a bunch of stuff that's chucked in there. You have to a little bit divorce the fact that maybe someone who buys the unit may or may not want the pieces, and commit to it, and including commissioning bespoke pieces. It comes back to that point of differentiation. And actually, you can use doing a show unit as part of your creative process to try out some interesting suppliers that maybe, you know, on the private client side, that the particular 5, 10, 20 projects you're working on, your private clients are saying, I'm not sure I like this aesthetic. You can actually use it to be quite exploratory. So we do a lot of bespoke stuff actually in our show units. It does depend how early we come into the journey, because sometimes we're incredibly squeezed on lead times. We've literally had to sort of run around London buying, you know, and getting things together, because the developer's priority is having something ready on X date. But actually the Dubai show units, if I can make reference in my pack, it's the 2 units next to each other which have a hanging chandelier, rod chandelier. There it was really interesting. We came on board with the developer, and it's an interesting point actually, is that, you know, international show units. This is on the Palm in Dubai for a building called One Palm. Here we came on board with the developer actually quite early on. We were a part of the base build. So the developer decided to have 2 interior designers design 2 different base build palettes, so that, and they did up half of the building with one base build and another half with another base build. And here we came on board quite early. So the chandeliers are completely bespoke. The screens are bespoke. We designed joinery. There's lots of bespoke furniture. The coffee table, which is matching in both but slightly different color tones, metal tones, were made in Amsterdam by an amazing craftsperson. So actually we have the lead in here to create something really unique, and it's done amazingly for the developer, because they really stand out in the market in Dubai. And actually, this is a really interesting example where the purchaser who bought the marquee unit in this development, the penthouse, 29,000 square foot penthouse, the most expensive apartment purchase in the Middle East, saw our show units and commissioned us to do their penthouse, which is due to complete early next year. So that's a CGI of the reception space. So show units are an amazing opportunity to showcase your work, not only in terms of being able to publish, but people visiting them or being able to take. Just yesterday, I took potential clients to see one of our show units. It can be your showroom, and this is a great example where we won a really exceptional project through our show units.
Fantastic. So we've spoken a lot about what works, and there's some really incredibly inspiring things that we've seen here. I'd love to know what doesn't work. So what are the challenges that you come across most often, and what are the mistakes that are easiest to make?
I think what you've got to be really careful on show partner is scale and proportion. We've had a sofa delivered before that was so ridiculously overscale. It obviously didn't stay. It was rectified. Again, that's part of our job. That it would have thrown all the proportions, and often in some of the developments up and down the river, you're quite tight on space. Some of the apartments aren't that generous. Often a developer will choose the most difficult apartment that he has to sell. They have to sell might be the one they choose to be their show apartment. So you're often in there trying to maximize what might be a very tight space. So I would say that's one of the big challenges. Don't ever overfill the space, because you've got to think about circulation of space. You may have 2, 3, 4 people wandering around that space at any one time. So those are some of the trip hazards that you can fall into.
Charu?
I think for us, it's been on a couple of developments where we've received drawings of what was going to be built. We want the architects on it. We designed our interiors around the drawings. But actually what was being built was quite different. We thankfully caught it in time. So I think, if you've been hired as an interior designer on a project that's being built, make sure you're doing regular site visits and actually seeing what's actually happening on site. And actually, one of the benefits of coming in later in the process is there's nothing like standing in a space, seeing the view, seeing how the sun comes in. So really use that to your advantage. And catch that discrepancy between what the developer says they're building and what is actually happening on site. I think that mismatch can be a hazard. And I think the other thing is really ensuring that you and the developer are on the same page in terms of your aspirations out of the project. Because ultimately, what is your brief? It's to sell the project and the property. And if you have a really strong view on what is going to achieve that, then making sure you're aligned. We've had instances where the artwork budget has been left not fully defined and it's kind of skid in at the end. I think art is just so important, especially if you're designing a scheme which is quite pared back, and the art is, Karen talked about the art collector's apartment. Well, to do the art collector's apartment, you really need the art to sing. So I think not leaving certain things as an afterthought like the art, but bringing them in really early on in the process. Having that conversation early has stood us in really good stead, I would say.
I think also is understanding that you will never be left with a clear and empty site, because the developer that finished right the minute the builders are finished. I mean, I never forget once we were installing something in Knightsbridge, and the team always go into meltdown because they're like, the decorators are still here, and then I'm like, it's fine, we'll work around everybody, it'll all be fine in the end. And we install the bed and everything in the master bedroom. We go to finish the reception room. I come back and the plumber had been in and he'd moved the bath onto our bed, which was beautifully made up, everything, because they'd suddenly had a leak. And it was just like, I mean, the times that's happened, honestly, if I had £1 for every one of those. So it's really stressful at the end. and you're all working together to make it happen. But when it's done, and I know certainly for the team, they kind of vie to do the show apartments in the studio, because it's a bit like Christmas coming early. You're unwrapping all of these lovely things that you've designed and worked on, and putting them all in place down to the kind of last teaspoon. It's really very satisfying for a designer to do that.
And I think another thing which we really try and avoid is rental furniture, because you just can't control it. If you're renting a sofa, that rental company can swap out what's available and scale and proportion. You can't just bung a 3-seater sofa where there needed to be a 2-seater sofa. And so that's something, we really, really hold our ground on and say, please do not rent things. I think, like I said, you have to commit to the unit. You have to do it up on the premise that someone's going to walk in there and fall in love and buy the unit as it is. This kind of trying to be very, very temporary doesn't work unless you're really working with a supplier who's going to bring an added layer of something special by rental. So renting art, special pieces, we do that quite often. But I think if everything in there is temporary, it can be quite hard to pull it together.
So you really want to do it with commitment?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
That's a good point.
So in terms of the future, I mean, I know we haven't got that much time left, but in terms of the future, how, in your experience to date, have things changed, particularly in recent years? Where do you see them going in the next sort of 5 years? Are the trends evolving in any surprising directions?
Well, I think, obviously what we're going through at the moment is having a big impact on the developer market. I mean, we've managed to avoid talking about it so far, but we can't really together. We're up for talking about it. I do think that in terms of the trends, we're designing a show apartment at the moment, actually, and we are taking into account that people are going to be working at home more. So, we went through a phase where nobody wanted dining rooms and nobody wanted studies, and now they're back in again. And, we need to demonstrate how those can work in a home. I think there's a lot more focus on the home, actually. So I think, developers are realizing that they've got to take it up to the next level, which is great for us because we're always wanting to move forward, really.
Absolutely. Would you say standards have been rising as well in terms of show flat design?
Oh yeah, they have.
Yes, absolutely.
I think if I don't know if I'd show you one from 30 years ago, but as I said at the beginning, we really did just put furniture in the space. It wasn't considered. Now we put, we layer the base spec with paneling and mirrors and all sorts of additional items that you simply wouldn't have done back in the day. You'd have put a few pictures up and mirrors. There's always mirrors everywhere to make everything look bigger. Now it's a very, very different process. We consider every single surface when we're looking at how we can embellish and add to the show apartment, because that's what the private, this is driven by the private clients. They expect a level of detail that really we wouldn't have seen 20 years ago.
Sure,
I mean, this is quite a good example, because actually there's a television behind the central panel there, which wasn't obviously in the base spec. So, we put that in and you press a button and the panel goes up and the television comes out. And this, again, the developer in here, as Charu said, when he launched, actually put an amazing collection of art in all of the apartments and was very much focused on that. Launched it around the time of all the art exhibitions and sales, and really kind of brought some energy to the area that had been lacking actually for a long time. So, and just looking at, walling and headboard walls and all of that kind of thing. It is just taken to a whole different level now.
Absolutely, and it is, as we've explained, it is such a great opportunity to showcase so many different ideas and different skills and your work and the design behind it. So it's absolutely wonderful and really inspiring to see these examples. I think we're going to have to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, but maybe we could just finish by saying what you're most looking forward to next. So what you might be working on now that you might be able to tell us a little bit about.
Well, we're very excited that we are working on, well, two things. One is in Show House, one's a crazy hotel in Soho, but the other is we're working on K1 in Knightsbridge, which is 34 apartments. It's above Knightsbridge Tube Station. It's on the corner of Sloane Street and Knightsbridge, and it's very unusually going to be for high-end rental. None of them are going to be sold, but we will be doing show apartments as such, because some people will want a rental fully furnished and some will not. And that's going to be launching in 2022, and it's really exciting, having a lovely journey on that. Great team. And again, different looks for different, there's some listed areas in that development, there are some new areas, and so the nice thing is we've got 4 or 5 different looks going on there. So often we'll put different teams working on different areas, so that it's almost like having 4 different interior designers but under one roof. So that's very exciting to see that come to life.
How exciting.
Yeah.
And the hotel in Soho too.
Oh, the hotel in Soho is launching next year. It's called Chateau Denmark. You all have to come and see it, because it's the only hotel for the music industry. It's Gothic within an inch of its life. It's crazy nuts, and it's in Denmark Street, Timpan Alley, where all of that history is there. We've got listed graffiti from the Sex Pistols, and honestly, we've just let our imagination go completely and utterly nuts, which is what we've needed in the last 6 months.
How fantastic. How fantastic. Charu, what can we see from Elicyon coming years, months?
Well, we've got a lot on at the moment. We've got some of our London work that's quite exciting. Is we have a really amazing apartment finishing in Mayfair in a few weeks for a client who's very into reading, and their library and that whole aspect of their life is a big part of the apartment. And it's got this kind of beautiful, quite intimate quality to it. We're working on a very interesting yacht with a very strong focus on wellness. That's one trend that we're seeing coming through, a lot of focus on well-being and wellness, and we're doing this incredible yacht project focusing on wellness. We're also working on an incredible listed development actually in Knightsbridge, where there's a mix of units that the developer is going to retain for themselves to live in. Some they're going to rent and some they're going to sell. It has a really pared back, very beautiful palette to it, really celebrating materiality and natural materials. I'm really looking forward to that. So quite a mix. And on the show unit front, we're looking at a really interesting project in the Middle East, which is about not actually doing a project, but selling a concept. And that's something that we sometimes get approached by developers for, is we create a concept that the purchaser can buy, so that when a purchaser is viewing a potential development, they can see what they can do with it. I really enjoy those actually, because they can be even more creative, because you're not even actually building it to start with. You can kind of create a brochure. So I'm really excited about that one.
Stop you there though, because we are right on the dot of the clock, and
timing, Henrietta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Oh, it's always lovely to chat to you, Henrietta.
Pleasure. And thank you to Design Centre.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Hosting us.
Thank you.
You've had.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye everybody. Thank you.